Let's discuss the album Beauty Stab by ABC.
This is a record I had decades ago, and during my 95 purge, the two albums by this band I have both got purged. Whatever the reason was, it wasn't feeling it in 95. And I don't remember how good this record is. But first of all, we'll start at the top of the alphabet. A, B, C. Now, this is their second album. Their first album was a massive hit, number one in the UK in 1981, Lexicon of Love. Martin Fry was the lead singer. And that band, as I recall, they really kind of wanted to be, there was sort of a punk, post-punk, but wanted to be more soulful, a little bit of a disco, very slick. And that was a huge hit. It was big here, at least, I don't know about chart-wise, I don't remember, but it was a huge hit, slick hit, very pop, very dance, very, the beginning of the 80s. And when this came out, I think this is 1982, so this is now 40 years old. Or is this 83? It might be 82, 83. Okay. But this is a Beauty Stab. Now, it had a different producer, a different feel. And I just played this, literally, I played it last night. I put it on and I played it again, back to back. And I blasted this mother. This is amazing. And I kind of looked it up to refresh my memory about this record, just some background. And the critics hated this record. And a lot of fans, I mean, although it did well, it didn't do anywhere near as well as their debut album. This is more of a guitar-based driven album. It's more rock and roll. It's less disco, less soulful, less dance. But the arrangements are amazing. And I tell you, Martin Fry's voice is really, really good on this. And there's a tightness of the production, the drums, the bass. It's really tight, no reverb. I really enjoyed it immensely. ABC, their second album, I think it needs a reevaluation. I don't know. I haven't read some subsequent reviews now. They had a ton of records after that. I think the guitarist left after this album. There was a little bit of a shakeup. But I don't follow this band. I never follow them personally in terms of personnel or their output or the reformation. But there was that time around this time, just before there's a little, I think the first couple of cuts have a little bit of that initial 80s filigree of keyboards, but then it really settles in. This album rocks, and the arrangements are really interesting. It's not your typical song cycle, in my opinion. I think this is a fantastic record, and I just got this copy from my friend in Santa Monica, the Wax, right? Is that where I got this from? But I love this, and it sounds great. This is a great pressing. So love this on Mercury Records and American Pressing.
So welcome to Garage Geek. You saw that I have a guest star for this episode. So that was Norman Maslov. And not only did he recommend this album wholeheartedly, but he also did a good job of kind of giving the album an overview. I'm also going to give a short overview, and it might be a little bit repetitive. And then I'm going to give my take on this album after listening to it for quite a while. So this is their second studio album, put out in November of 1983, and it was a huge departure from their very popular first album, The Lexicon of Love. So this album was more guitar-oriented, and to dismiss it as just that is to do it a disservice. But the fans weren't expecting that, and the critics really disliked this album, and they lost a lot of popularity. This album was nowhere near, didn't sell nowhere near as well as Lexicon of Love. It was negatively reviewed upon its release, and it has been identified as among the great career-sabotaging albums of pop history because the group did it to themselves. They wanted to go in a different direction from their first album, and they did.
Call it attraction or charm. Sound the alarm.
The lyrics to the first song, that was then, but this is now, has been put on the worst lyric polls for the lyric, "Can't complain, mustn't grumble, help yourself to a piece of apple crumble. To be honest, as I listened to that song, I didn't think the lyrics were that bad.
That was then, but this is now.
There's quite a few songs on this album, and I'm going to say that my reaction to this album was like it was slow for me to catch on to it. I've actually listened to this before. I've had it on vinyl. I take it out every so often, and I would put it on. But listening to it over and over again because of Norman's recommendation, and then being forced to listen to it, this album really grew on me. In fact, I actually come back to this album over and over again. So I actually asked him if I could review this album. It's been at least a month, maybe more. I'm just behind, but I've had it in my playlist, and whenever I would sit down to read or do something, I would actually come back to this album repeatedly. It would be an album of choice. Now, the funny thing is, when I started going through the tracks to find which ones I wanted to provide snippets of, it was difficult for me to pick parts that really stood out. I think this album flows really well together, and it's good if you actually listen to the whole album. It's not going to be a hits album or an album that you really get a lot of pop singles from, but it's more of you listen to the whole album and you just appreciate it for what it is. So I agree with Norman Maslov that this is a really fun and interesting album, and I really think that you should give it a try. But if you give it a try, don't listen to it just once. Put it in a playlist and come back to it. And I think that this album is going to really grow on you, and that you're going to really appreciate it over time. So thank you so much for Norman Maslov for being my guest host.